All right, hello everybody. I'm Joshua, the undercover autistic. At least I am the undercover autistic for the purposes of this channel and this video. So, this is actually my very first video that I'm making for this project. And I believe where I begin is that today I'm on a journey, but I'm actually on a journey of more than one sorts. At this very moment, I'm driving down the road. I'm in Kansas. I'm on a journey from Oklahoma to Colorado to attend a wedding. Recently, I've also been working through another journey as well. And that's a journey of basically, to make it concisely, I've been working with a clinical psychologist that specializes in adult autism. And I'll get to that story in just a moment, but basically, kind of the culmination of a number of things, I began suspecting that possibly I'm actually autistic. I'd never been evaluated. I'd never had anybody tell me that they thought I was autistic. But I'll kind of go through the story in just a few minutes. I've basically recently gone through this process of being evaluated. And actually just last week, I received the clinical diagnosis that I'm actually autistic. So, it's kind of like a big piece of information. And so you might wonder, like, how does someone go through life for so many years and not realize something like this? And so I also ask myself that same question. But basically, looking kind of back at my life, I've always felt that I was different than most people around me. Different in a pretty noticeable way, or what to me felt like a pretty profound difference. I remember kind of at a young age, I remember going to, like when I went to kindergarten, and I remember I show up at kindergarten and I'm like, what is this place? This place is crazy. There are all these like little kids, and I'm like, what are all these little kids? They act so childish. They act so immature. It's kind of funny because I was actually one of the youngest kids in class. Due to my birth date, I was close to the cutoff, and I think there was only one other kid who was, just a few days younger than me. So I think he and I were the youngest two in the class. And so a lot of these kids are basically like a year older than me, but nonetheless, I felt like all of these kids in kindergarten were like babies. They were so childish, at least from my eyes. And that seems kind of odd to say since I was also just 5 years old. But anyway, they just act bizarre. And to me, I felt like I was mature. I was like, hey, let's do some business here. Let's learn something. Let's do something serious. And it was just, it felt like it was mostly a waste of time. The kids are just doing silly things. I felt like they treated us very childish. They had these jumbo pencils, which I don't know if they still use them, but at the time, apparently, it was the recommendation that kindergarten kids use these jumbo pencils. But they were much bigger around and much longer than a normal pencil, and I'd been used to using just normal adult pencils at home, drawing pictures and the such. And they gave us these pencils, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. If you look at proportions, it's like as a grown-up, I'm using a pencil that's like a log. How am I supposed to hold that in my hand and write with it? It was just like crazy. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But of course, they didn't, agree or even have interest in hearing my point of view, which I thought was outrageous because I thought I had a very reasonable point of view. They made us take nap time, where we had to take out these naps and lay down on the mat. And of course, a lot of kids were taking naps. I'm like, I haven't been taking naps for years. I don't want to do this. I don't need a nap. But they forced us to lay down on the mats literally for the entire year. I never took a nap. I was forced to lay on the mat and be silent and not get off the mat. And so I just lay there on this mat. I lights off in the room, all these kids around me sleeping, and I'm just laying there with my eyes open, silently lying on the mat, just feeling angry that they forced me to do this. I was like, this place is a prison. This is like terrible. So anyway, kindergarten to me was like a disaster. It started off like that. It was like that for the whole time. But basically, as I went through school, I found myself, feeling this pressure to attempt to fit in, but I never did. So basically, I just kind of observed, what's expected. I was pretty good at following rules, at least on the surface, and just trying to fit in, but I really felt that I never did. So anyway, my whole life is kind of like that. Now, coming forward to more recent times, I've kind of ignored this issue for most of my life and just thought, hey, I'm just different. And over the years, I've had some people tell me that I intimidate them because I'm so smart. Well, that's interesting because in some ways I feel like I struggle with certain things. I'm like, I don't know, I doubt my intelligence. But apparently a lot of people deem me as quite intelligent. Actually, as a kid in school, I was actually placed in the gifted program, so I was viewed as, above average intelligence, I suppose. I did well in school. I got good grades. I got my undergraduate degree, went on, got a master's degree from a world-ranked university. I was actually valedictorian of my class, so I've done pretty well academically. But interesting thing is, I almost never learn anything from class. From the time I was a child going through school, elementary school, high school, college, master's program, even though I've consistently gotten excellent grades, and I'm often at the top of like 100% grades, top of everything, but I literally learned very little from the teachers and the classes that I've been in. It's almost always I'm just reading the books on my own and figuring out on my own, because somehow the learning style of classrooms just doesn't work for me. So sometimes people have told me that I intimidate them. I've heard people say things like, you're like a walking encyclopedia. We ask you a question and you just know so much about it, and it's really intimidating. And so, okay, people think I'm a walking encyclopedia. I often do have this vast store of knowledge or information on certain topics. I realize that I have an eye for detail that is sort of is on a level beyond most people. So my attention to detail, my observation of visual details, recognizing patterns, having unique perspectives. There are kind of a lot of things, I guess, that stand out. So I'm like, okay, I've been viewed as intelligent. People think I'm high intelligence. I'm like, maybe I'm just different. Maybe that's why I'm not on the same level with people, just because, I don't know, we're just not on the same level. So I just have tried to kind of accept it most of my life. But recently, there were kind of a number of things that kind of culminated to cause me to kind of begin asking some questions and wanting to explore this topic in kind of a new light. So one of them, maybe a couple of months ago or a few months ago, I'm not good at keeping track of time. It's fairly recently. There was a sermon at church, and the pastor, in fact, there was one concept that really caught my attention so much that I really don't even know what he was talking about, because there was a thought that captured my attention that I kept thinking about, and so I didn't really tune into most of what he said. But he had a prop on stage. He had a mirror, and he was looking into this mirror, and I believe he was talking about our tendency as people to, kind of be so focused on others, judging them, critiquing them, oh, what's wrong with this person? What's wrong with that person? Just being judgmental of others and thinking other people should change and such, that we often don't look at ourselves. And so he was holding up this mirror and saying, hey, we should look in the mirror, like really look at ourselves and then say, hey, what do I need to possibly work on with myself, or adjust with myself, or maybe where are my shortcomings? Maybe I should start there. So focus on ourselves first rather than critiquing others, basically. So I think that was kind of the message. So he's holding up this mirror, and what occurred to me, which he didn't say a word about this, but what stood out to me was the thought that, hey, you know what? Even if I did spend my life looking in this mirror at myself, but I would be getting a distorted, inverse view. Because when you look in the mirror, you see everything reversed. You know, if your part is on this side or that side, but when you look in the mirror, it looks like it's on the opposite because you're seeing this reverse. So if I move my right hand, but when I look in the mirror, it looks like the guy in the mirror is moving his left hand. I'm sure you're aware of this, but if not, go to the mirror, take a look, and check it out. You realize everything's opposite. So if you haven't seen a photo of yourself in a long time, and you just look in the mirror a lot, the day that you see a photo may look kind of weird to you because everything looks opposite of what you're used to. You're like, hey, what's up with this guy? Like his, if there's a freckle, it's like it's on the wrong side. The part is on the wrong side. So it's kind of weird. So I'm thinking, is it possible that we could spend a lifetime literally having a distorted view of ourselves? And I think, it's probably not only possible, it's probably highly probable, because I don't think we see ourselves accurately. We have, kind of biased views of ourselves, but also there's so many things that we just may not read accurately. So I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe I've been sort of overlooking things about myself or seeing them in a distorted sense. And I thought, well, maybe it would be interesting if I had a professional who is, a clinical psychologist who's professional at looking at people and evaluating them, say, hey, what's going on with me? What's going on with me? So I mentioned kind of that curiosity. There are some other things that have come up in the course of my work where I realize, on one hand, people say things like, you're like super smart, you're like a genius, you intimidate us with your intelligence and how much you know about things. I get that, but I also get another thing where some people are impatient with me because they'll ask a question and they'll say things like, why are you so literal? Or you take everything so literally? Or, hey, why did you answer the question like that? I think you know what you know what I meant. So this has come up repeatedly, where I tend to take things very literally and respond in a very literal way. So it's like, okay, this is a unique characteristic. Seems different than most people. But also, people will ask a question, and I begin telling a story. And I realize a lot of people don't have the patience for my story. And I think, well, I kind of would feel like, well, if you don't want to hear the answer, why ask? I feel like that's disrespectful and insulting to ask me the question if you are not interested enough to receive the answer. But then I began thinking, like, this is like a trend where people often don't have the patience or the level of interest that I do in various things, and they tune out. They're not really up to hearing the answer. So I began putting together, kind of reflecting, putting together so many of these things, and then thinking, like, hey, what if it's not just me? What if it has to do with my communication style or the way that my mind works? What if it's just really different from normal people in some way? And what if that's the issue? Not just me as a person, but just maybe the way I talk doesn't work for a lot of people. And so I began looking on that, and I was like, I think that is. Sometimes people ask a question, and they are looking for maybe like a 60-second or 30-second answer. But to me, this question brings up so many things. I'm like, man, I could talk for literally, an hour or a week on this topic to fully answer that question. And I feel like, out of respect for you, I want to fully answer the question. But most people don't think like that, and they don't want to listen for an hour or a week. So I realized, like, you know what? Somehow there's something different going on with me. So I kind of began becoming open to the idea of thinking, you know what, I don't know, I've lived most of my life like this, but maybe I'd like to get some fresh perspectives and begin looking at things in a new way, including like how I view myself and how I view my relation with others. And so I became open to this idea of having an evaluation. When I began initially talking with the clinical psychologist, they told me that a lot of adults who suspect they may be autistic end up having an evaluation, and they're very often not diagnosed as autistic, but maybe they have other things going on, maybe social anxiety or just different kinds of issues. There are a broad variety of other things could be going on. And so very often adults are not diagnosed as autistic. In my case, though, I ended up being diagnosed as quite significantly autistic. And so it's interesting to me that nobody seems to have ever noticed this, but then I realize people notice I'm different. They just don't know why. And sometimes they think it's just because I'm unusual or highly intelligent. And so it's like, okay, well, interesting. I've been kind of just trying to make life work, make my interactions with people work. But I'm like, maybe I can take things to a new level with this new information. So that's kind of the beginning of my journey. As I said, I'm literally on a journey driving across Kansas right now, looking at all these vast fields of corn and wheat and the such. But I'm also on a journey of, wow, I just received a clinical diagnosis of autism. I'm 50 years old. 50 years old, and I just get this kind of news. It seems crazy. But on the other hand, I realize that maybe it's not so crazy. So for example, I'm also colorblind. I didn't know I was colorblind until I believe it was the age of 25 or 26, I believe I was at the time. And I found out I'm colorblind because I went to do a driving test in Taiwan, actually. I lived in Taiwan for many years. And so I was fairly new in Taiwan. I went to do a driving test, and I went through all the phases of it. And then toward the end, they sort of did this physical thing. We have to do some physical, like show you can bend down, get up, squeeze your hands, different things, because it was a motorcycle test. They want to make sure you can physically handle a motorcycle. And then they brought out this book. Some of you may know the book with all the little dots, little colored dots, and said, hey, what's the number? What number do you see? And I'm like, I don't see a number. I just see a bunch of dots. So the examiner turned the page and showed me another one, and I'm like, oh my goodness, is it 3 maybe? No. You don't see the number? I think it might be a 3? No, totally not. So the examiner flipped through multiple pages asking if I could see these numbers, and I couldn't see numbers. I just saw a bunch of dots. I'm like, what does this mean? People are telling me, people standing around, my friends, they're like, you don't see the numbers? I'm like, I don't see any numbers. I just see a bunch of colored dots. So that's when I found out I'm actually colorblind. So I'm not completely colorblind. Most people who are colorblind are, still see colors, but they may not see the full range or the full variety of variations that normal vision people can see. So fortunately for me, they gave me another option at the end. They had this artificial traffic light set up that is basically the red, yellow, green lights, and it would light up, and they just asked me what the light was. And I'm like, oh, that's the yellow light. That's the red light. Oh, Hongdong in Chinese, obviously. And so I passed that. I was able to see colors well enough to be able to do a test like that. And so when I'm driving, I can tell usually the color of the traffic light, but I'm often not able to see, distinguish variations of color like most people can. So anyway, though, I went through my childhood, all of my life, not knowing I was colorblind until the age of 25 or 26. So I'm like, okay, I've kind of been through something like this before, where there's something that you've been functioning, just doing your best to function, but there's a piece of information, there's something different about you from normal people that you're not aware of, or that you're just kind of ignoring. And so here I am now finding out that I'm autistic. But it's interesting, as I'm kind of learning more about this, it really helps to answer a lot of questions. I think I'm going to make a number of videos. I'm going to be talking about some of these different things that I've dealt with throughout my entire life. But now with this diagnosis of autism, I'm able to look at those things and kind of with a new perspective and realize, okay, this is why I dealt with these issues, or this is what was going on. And so I'm going to share part of that journey with you. And I think what I'd like to do is maybe I think it's therapeutic for me just to be able to share this, or be able to speak it out and talk about it, because this is something I've never talked about in my life. Something I just avoided. I was always trying to be normal, but I never was. I was always somehow trying to fit in, and I mostly did. I would kind of, be under the radar, but I've always felt kind of like an alien amongst people. I've always felt like kind of an outsider or a foreigner of some kind. And so now I was like, okay, well, this kind of explains a lot of things. So I'm going to talk through a lot of those things. I think it'll be therapeutic for me, but maybe it'll be helpful for some of you that maybe you yourself might be in a similar situation that I'm in, where you find, hey, I've never been evaluated. I've never really had a psychological evaluation of any kind, but there's some things about me that might be a little bit different from neurotypical people, normal people, whatever you want to call it. And maybe it could be empowering and helpful to gain some fresh insights, or maybe get some professional help trying to understand what's going on, because maybe that information you can kind of leverage to find some more effective ways of living life, of managing relationships, or different things in life. And so I think for me, part of it's going to be trying to share some information about this with people that I work with, people that I'm close to, in terms of how can we work together better. And I've already begun to realize some things. So for example, with some of the people that I work with that really like really short and concise answers, the thing I can help them understand is that I take things very literally. That's just how my mind works. And if you ask me a question, or if you say something like, tell me all about your vacation. Well, if you were to say that to me, I feel like, out of respect for you, you want to know all about my vacation. You really want to know all about it. I'm probably going to be talking for hours to tell you all about it. Most people don't want that. So what would be helpful to me is to give me a really focused answer, a focused question. So for example, if you were to say, hey, what was the one biggest highlight, or what was the one most unusual thing that you saw or experienced, or just ask me a narrow question, and that can probably direct my mind in such a way that I can give you a much more short and concise answer. So if you want a concise answer, ask a question that corresponds to a concise answer. At least that's how it is for me. So just things like that. And also asking for other things. For example, it really bothers me when things are out of place, in a sense. So for example, in my office, I work in an office where there are other people that work in the office. And so at least in my workspace, I need for my desk, everything has a very precise place that it lives, or that it exists, that I've placed it. And I place everything purposefully, even if people don't understand that. Everything has an order to it and a very exact place that it goes. So if I were to come in the office and find that anything on my desk, my keyboard, or anything has moved, even very slightly, by centimeter, I instantly notice it as soon as I walk in the room. And it actually really bothers me. Like, I would feel upset And I often wonder, well, why is this? I don't know. It seems because other people don't seem to respond that way. So I've basically just suppressed this, but it actually really bothers me. But I don't want to show people I'm upset because that seems unacceptable. But I'm thinking now, you know what? This is just part of how I'm made. Things like that really bother me. So since that's how I'm made, I think it's reasonable I can ask people, say, hey, you know what? At least in this little space where I work, don't touch anything. Like, seriously. Like, just don't touch anything, because if you do, I'm going to notice it and it's going to bother me. Now, is that really hard to ask? I don't think so. So I can ask people to extend me that courtesy. There are other things too, but that's just an example. Just making some simple requests that help me to have a better quality of work life. I've also started talking about some of these things with my wife. She's been very supportive and encouraging, but I think it's also going to be helpful for her because she sometimes, doesn't understand why I react the way that I do to certain things. And sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know. That's just, I don't know. That's just how I'm made, I guess. So anyway, I'm hoping that as I begin making some of these videos, that they'll be interesting to somebody out there, or maybe encouraging or inspiring to somebody who's considering getting evaluated, or maybe you're thinking like, hey, should you talk openly about something like this? Or maybe you have a loved one, maybe you have a partner or somebody, a friend or a coworker that is autistic, and you just don't really understand much about it, and you don't really know what it means, or you don't know how to be a better support to them, or how to interact with them more effectively. Maybe you don't understand the reactions, or you think you do, but they actually don't mean what you think that they mean, because to an autistic person, some of the nonverbal reactions may be quite different than they are for a neurotypical person. So I think I want to be able to share. I'm hoping it may be able to encourage some people. Maybe I can expand some awareness, what have you. But hey, if you're watching and you're still watching this, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your interest. I think that it will be helpful to have a broader level of awareness about autism and just all kinds of other things that people deal with. We don't all deal with the exact same things. I think in some way we're all pretty much the same. I think all humans literally are quite the same, but we make a big deal out of these little subtle differences. But those little subtle differences can sometimes feel very dramatically different for us. Even like in my case, where I say I've most of my life felt like an alien or a foreigner around people. I just don't feel I'm the same. I don't feel my mind works the same. I don't feel my communication's the same. I try to fit in, but I'm like forcing it. I want to do less of that and be just more of how I am, but also at the same time be more effective at having interactions that work for me, but also work for other people. So I'll have more to come. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. Have an awesome day.